So, you've walked past Colossus, the awful roller coaster manufactured by Intamin with the sole purpose to fracture people's skulls, and you see this tall, compact roller coaster off in the distance, and you're thinking, surely that can't be as bad, right? With a height of 100 foot and an 100-degree beyond vertical drop, this is the world's first horror-themed roller coaster. This is Saw the Ride. As you move closer, you see these massive saw blades, this huge warehouse, you can hear all these police sirens going off, intense music, and you're like, oh. Honestly, I have to say, the entrance plaza for Saw the Ride is pretty impressive. It's very atmospheric. The warehouse that you see beside you, which is actually the ride show building's got all these fans spinning round and stuff, and it's really detailed. You can see the beyond vertical drop and vertical lift hill, along with a police car which is parked outside. The actual entrance for the ride is located at the opposite end of the plaza, where you've got a main queue, a single rider queue which was introduced last season, as well as fast track and ride access pass queues. Upon entering the queue, you're greeted with some very well themed barbed wire style fencing, and the ambience also changes as well. There's a different soundtrack playing in there which is very eerie and really builds up the tension very well for the experience. There's also various set pieces which are actually trapped from the various Saw movies, and for those who aren't aware, the Saw franchise is basically themed to this absolute psychopath who wants to trap and torture and murder people pretty much, so that's nice. You eventually reach an entrance to this warehouse which you could see from the plaza, and you hear people screaming from around the corner, at which point your mind is filled with dread regarding like what could possibly be round there. And when you do turn the corner, you're greeted by these shotguns hanging from the ceiling, and every 90 seconds or so you hear the triggers of these shotguns being pulled before you jump out of this skin at this loud bang as the shotguns essentially shoot at you. You then proceed down the corridor where you've got some more set pieces on your right themed to the Saw franchise, and at the end of that there's a merge point where there's another entrance to the building for ride access pass users, etc. So thankfully, ride access pass users do not have to endure that jump scare from the shotguns to the same extent. It is also worth noting that there's a separate ride access pass entrance for non-ambulant guests, which involves getting in a lift that takes you up to the station platform. However, I believe that this lift has been broken for a number of years, so please, Thorpe, sort your rides out, like, it's not good enough. Going back to the main queue, as you can imagine, you then proceed up a series of stairs which feature some really simple but cool boarded up windows. You've essentially got glass with wooden planks aligned vertically going up it, and this really works to further emphasize the idea that you're entering a building operated by someone with ulterior motives. That person being Jigsaw, who you can see on some screens telling you a bit about the backstory of the ride and all the safety instructions you need before you get on, such as to secure your loose articles,
keys, wallets,
cell phones. Like what? Like, oh, for God's sake, obviously Saw's an American film and Americans call mobile phones cell phones. Like, look at this cell phone, what? It's a mobile phone. Look, it's a phone but it's portable, so it's mobile. Like, I'm holding it in my hand now. You then enter the station where you've got a baggage hold on your right hand side which you need to put all bags in, along with a lot of theming including dirty windows that are flickering at the back of the station, which is quite effective. You've got a countdown clock above where the train dispatches and some more screens as well, along with more boarded up windows. A word of wisdom, which may seem like common sense to the experienced enthusiasts out there: it is recommended that you sit on a middle seat rather than an outer seat when riding Saw, with Saw being a Gerstlauer Eurofighter which features 2 rows with 4 seats per row. You'll then enter a dark ride section where you've got Jigsaw on the right on a tricycle, and if you're on the front car, because Saw actually dispatches 2 cars at once, you'll move straight past that, whereas if you're the second car to dispatch, you'll stop at that, where Jigsaw will explain a bit more about the backstory of the ride, in that you're trapped in a mechanical device, which is of course the train, that will determine your existence. After that, you'll then pass another countdown clock and around the corner before you see a pendulum swinging in front of you, and you're under the impression you're going to collide with that before you plunge down a near vertical drop in the dark that is tiny but terrifying at the same time, especially for first time riders, and up round the corner into a mid-course brake run, where you've got some more air cannons that are blasting at you, simulating you being fired at with crossbows. You'll then proceed round another turn into the ride's first of 3 inversions, which is a heartline roll, which goes over this body which is led face down, and at first glance it looks like it's squirting out its arse, but it's actually squirting out its back. Now, I should probably clarify that this body is squirting water out of it up at the train as it goes through the inversion, so you can get a bit wet. And this water is meant to simulate blood, in that the body is essentially bleeding to death. Let's move swiftly on. You then pull out into some trim brakes, at which point you've actually exited the warehouse before turning a corner, after which you're presented with the 100-foot tall vertical lift hill. And at this point, the average Thorpe non-enthusiast is like, "Oh man, game over mate, game over." Before Jigsaw ironically says,
Game over.
And then starts laughing at you. You then proceed pretty quickly up the vertical lift hill, where you actually get some brilliant views of both the park and the surrounding area, before you then plummet down the 100-degree beyond vertical drop and under some saw blades, which creates a very good head chopper near miss element. Now, up to this point, the ride's actually ironically been pretty smooth. However, a lot of people talk about quite a nasty jolt at the bottom of that drop, which I personally have never noticed on the ride. However, it is quite evident both off-ride and in POVs. You then pull up into what is one of my favourite elements on a UK coaster, just because of how forceful it is. And that is an Immelman. Not a junior Immelman like the one on Icon, an actual proper Immelman that inverts you upside down. When you transition out of this Immelman, you can get quite a bit of headbanging because the profiling isn't the best. It's quite a snappy transition. However, I've never found that moment to be anything close to unbearable. You then proceed round a small turn, followed by an overbank, which is all pretty good, before you rise up into an airtime hill, which does feel a little bit jolty, but I don't personally find painful. And as for the airtime hill itself, it does give some nice ejector airtime. After dropping down out of that, you pull up into a mid-course brake run, and I can't lie, this part of the ride is pretty uncomfortable. Expect to get some headbanging on that. As for the mid-course brake run itself, it barely slows the train down. I've heard that when the ride first opened, it did slow the train down quite a bit. However, they've either turned the trim brakes off it completely or significantly reduced their effect, because I've never felt or seen the train really slow down on that. Now, the advantage of the train not slowing down on this is that you actually get another pop of nice ejector airtime as you drop out of this into a dive loop. This dive loop is way too small for how fast the train is going. I can understand that Saw isn't that tall a coaster and was probably designed for the mid-course brake run to be operating how it did when the ride first opened. However, as things stand currently, the train is just going too quickly, and you get some awful headbanging through that. The left-hand turn that follows isn't much better, as you speed through that and absolutely slam into the final brake run, where you make your way back into the warehouse to a separate offload point, before you then pick up your bags for the baggage hold and proceed downstairs, where you've got some more screens with Jigsaw giving some further dialogue, and then back into the open, where you've just about miraculously survived. Despite the title of this video, I do not find Saw the Ride overall too bad in terms of roughness. Don't get me wrong, the ride does start to get worse after the airtime hill. However, it's nothing close to being the roughest coaster in the UK, as some people claim it to be. In fact, the overall theme, build-up, intensity and airtime makes Saw one of my top 10 UK coasters. And you know what? It's a better and more intense coaster than Nemesis. Speaking of which, if you want to find out more about the backstory of Nemesis, then you want to get yourselves down to Alton Towers to experience their brand new dark ride, Nemesis Subterra. Find out more by clicking the video on the right side of your screen. And for more things theme park related in the UK and beyond, make sure you click the icon in the centre of your screen to subscribe.